Hello, everyone. This is Clark County Commissioner William McCurdy II coming to you for our third episode of Mental Health Mondays with McCurdy and Mingo. And we're here talking about something incredibly important. We're talking about suicide prevention and raising more awareness about suicide in our community. And I couldn't be more proud and more thankful and more honored to be joined by someone in our community who's doing the work day in and day out, Bianca McCall. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist. And we're going to kick it off to our co-host, Dinisha Mingo.
Hey. You know what? We just heard an incredible story that I'm excited to hear Bianca's expertise on. And this conversation is so important because it is National Suicide Prevention Week. And so I just want to say, I think I first met her. We were speaking about some suicide thing on a panel, but you are a suicide epidemiologist. You have Reach In Now University. Like, you do the work. Like, your resume is just endless. But we can look what's on paper, but what's most important is we see what you do in the community day in and day out. And so I just want to thank you and invite you on.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I like to joke with people and tell them that my resume is longer than a holiday weekend. I just, anytime that anybody has an opportunity to be able to educate and empower community, and they call me up and they ask me to be a part of it, I'm like, yeah, okay, I can fit that in. So just adding things to the resume, of course. But
now you got this.
Yeah, well, and I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me to speak in this forum. The story that we just heard, the testimony that we just heard is incredible. It's powerful for such a young woman to be able to, or young lady, be able to come on and share such just an amazing testimony, and the fact that you have the platform to be able to share that with the community is amazing. I'm excited to be here with Sis and the commish, so thank you for having me.
So Bianca, being a licensed marriage and family therapist, I'm sure you're experienced in dealing with so many types of mental health issues, but you have chosen to really specialize in suicide. Tell us a little bit more about why and the work you do around it.
Yeah, so just to speak to, the first letters behind my name, LMFT, Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist, I always redirect people and tell them, well, the first letters are my name, Bianca McCall, and why do I do what I do? I'm a kid. I grew up, in the San Francisco Bay Area. I played basketball, and basketball had afforded me a lot of opportunities to see the world at a very young age and to meet people and to fall in love with people, right? And so, but it also, taught me some other things. I picked up some not so great habits along the way, as most athletes do, when you're training for competition, and you're almost training your brain to think, very concrete. It's win or go home, it's a W or an L. Yeah. And so I battled, with that mind frame and applying that to my entire life. I battled with anxiety, I battled with depression, and I didn't really know that that's what you called it, right? Because in my home, in my community, in my culture, it's kind of like, what happens here stays here, like Las Vegas, and you just, you put your big girl pants on and you strap up your boots and you go to work and you get it done, right, regardless of what you're going through. And so, I was highly recruited in basketball. I was on an official recruiting trip on an East Coast team and playing some pickup basketball. Well, in the middle of my 11th game, I go up to block a girl's shot and I blow out my knee. Tear my ACL, my MCL, my meniscus. Still block the shot, okay? Still block the shot.
Focused on the mission.
Yeah. Right? Executed all the way through. So I get flown home and I had to get reconstructive surgery, and I literally lost every single scholarship offer, And so I'm thinking, for me, coming from a small town in Northern California, I'm thinking I'm going to get to escape that transgenerational trauma, that childhood trauma, right? And I'm going to get to be the one that made it and get to college, but then I'm seeing everybody kind of close the door on that dream. So a 17-year-old girl, of course, there's a lot at 17 that makes me feel like my world's going to end, but that it was more than a physical injury. It was a spiritual injury at that point. I'm asking myself existential questions like, why am I here? Why did this happen to me? What am I going to do? Who am I if I can't perform? Are people going to like me, love me? All of these really heavy questions for a young woman, and I'm taking those into reconstructive surgery for my knee. So this is back, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but this is back in the late 90s, when we don't have a whole lot of education on what those types of injuries do to young women and young black women at that. So I go through the surgery and I get a little black button, that's giving me morphine right into my IV. It's party like it's 1999, so they're throwing opioids, narcotics, everything at me on my way out of the hospital. And about 2 weeks after surgery, I ended up back in the hospital, but this was from an overdose. And so the overdose, it came from, the labels say take every 4 to 6 hours for pain. But again, what is pain to a young black woman, that's just lost every opportunity to leave her situation? And again, spiritual pain, how do you express that? And so I was taking the pills probably every close to 2 to 3 hours, and ended up overdosing. I remember I opened my eyes 2 days later after the overdose, and everybody's talking to me kind of with these really like kid gloves, and they're telling me, well, because of your suicide attempt, we're thinking that, you're experiencing bipolar, and so we're going to prescribe Depakote, and some medications and things. And I've got a tube down my throat, and to be honest with you, I was quite confused at that time in my life. I was confused because I thought, well, suicide. I don't know if I was trying to kill myself. I definitely wanted the pain to go away, And so I just adopted kind of the labels that were told to me at the time. And there wasn't a whole lot of, education and information back then on, mental illness, on suicide, and on chemical dependency, right? And so that's also another kind of added layer to all this, is that my biochemistry changed. I'm taking all these medications at such a young age that definitely is going to change the way I handle stress, depression, and anxiety moving forward. And so this is quite the story, but fast forward, I did have 2 scholarship offers at the end of that. I went to one of them. I was accepted to Boise State University, and where I rehabbed my knee and things, and again, opened the world up to meet other people, that are also, from different walks of life. So throughout my college years, I had a situation where I had a teammate that was experiencing some of the same things that I, was. And I noticed it because I had lived through it, So I saw the signs and symptoms, but I didn't say anything or do anything because I didn't really know what to even do with myself. Right. One day, walk into the practice facility and find out that my teammate had died by suicide. So I saw that impact from, her family, our family as a team, the athletic department, the university, the community, and rippled outward. And the light in lieu of that tragedy was that at a young age, much like our first speaker, I found my life's purpose. I thought, I don't want to see this happen to not another family, not another team, university, community. I want to be a part of the solution in preventing suicide. So, of course, move out to the most spiritual, the fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, right. And here I am.
I'm thankful that you are here. I mean, your story is so powerful. It's so layered. We're going to have you back to even pull that apart. There was one thing that you did say that I think many people who are thinking about suicide or end up in situations where it may be deemed that they've attempted or they even die by suicide. And sometimes they're not necessarily wanting to kill themselves, but they're wanting to end the pain. Mm-hmm. As a professional, how can you speak to like that, the difference between someone having the intent to want to attempt or complete suicide and wanting to end the pain, and how do we work around that as clinicians?
Dinisha, I'm so happy that you pointed that out, and that's what you got from my story, because that is such an important piece of suicide prevention, is making that distinction and helping people to make that distinction between I want the pain to go away or I want my life to end, And I think especially when you're looking at young people or a young person, it's that permanence, right? Like you're making a very permanent decision for maybe a temporary experience of being in so much pain. And so I think from a professional standpoint, it is paramount that we dissect that we assess and we help guide the person that we're working with to make that distinction for themselves. That suicide is more permanent than temporary experiences of pain.
Yeah, because we even heard our first guest talk about she was cutting, and we didn't get into the depth of it, but that is also where my mind went. Another thing that I pulled out was your first attempt was 17. Hope, her first attempt was 12, and she's 14 now. And we have seen suicide kind of skyrocket. Can you share with us some of those statistics around suicide for the minority community, but then specifically our youths as well?
Absolutely. So the CDC, which is the Centers for Disease Control, they recently released a report, and I say recently, we're already in September, I can't believe it, but they released a report that since January of 2020 to January of 2021, they had seen an increase of 300,000 deaths related to mental dis-ease, ultimately suicidality and overdose. So prior to the novel coronavirus pandemic, we were seeing an average about 800,000 deaths due to suicide. So an increase of 300,000 is significant.
It is significant.
Of the 300,000, 40% are represented by what we call BIPOC communities. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the term BIPOC because, people of color, to wrap all these beautiful cultures into just people of color, it isn't my jam, but it's Black, it's Native Indigenous, it's Latino, it's Asian, it's Native Asian Pacific Islander, those communities.
It's District D.
It's District D. It's District D. Right? So go ahead and speak on it.
So we represent
need to hear
40% of those increases. And then it's even, it's multi-layered. So 40% represented by youth. Out of those youth, 50% of those have identified as LGBTQ.
Wow.
And so you've got a staggering statistic as our trans youth, 50% of those will have at least one suicide attempt before the age of 21. You've got youth that 70% of those youth that have attempted suicide have experienced one or more of what we call ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences. And those are things like divorce and separation in the family, one member of their family incarcerated, childhood abuse, substance use and substance use disorder, so misuse and abuse. Our children that are going through these experiences are at higher risk of suicide.
So thank you for sharing that and breaking down those statistics amongst our community members. There are a lot of people that are going to be watching, particularly a lot of parents, want to get a lot of students, and we know that a lot of students are going to be watching as well. What are the beginning signs from your professional experience that not only individuals who may be experiencing these symptoms may have, but also for the parents who may be trying to understand what a child may be going through? It goes like, what are the beginning steps that you see from your experience, and what should we be looking out for?
A couple things that I got to give a shout out to. One is, our state office for suicide prevention offers plenty of trainings that help us to identify signs and symptoms of suicide. They also offer trainings. There's one in particular that I want to encourage anybody to participate in. It's called Safe Talk. Now, Safe Talk, a lot of the Safe Talk classes are free through certain organizations and things like that. And it's certainly, if you are watching or listening to this podcast and you get in touch with Sis or Kamish and let them know that you want to do the Safe Talk training, I will make sure that you get that for free. Okay? So Safe Talk, and the highest cost that I've seen for it has been $30 if you want to attach CEUs to it, or $15 for the general public.
So really quick before I lose it.
Yeah.
Do they do what is it like? They do large cohorts of trainings, or are they digital? Can you do digital and in-person trainings? The
suicide prevention trainings through the office are done largely in person. And I say largely because, of course, after what we've gone through with the pandemic, we've had to do some suicide prevention trainings online. But Safe Talk is one that we want to do in person because they are very aware and sensitive to the subject of suicide and how it may activate certain responses in people. And that's a great segue to talk about, what are the signs and symptoms of suicide. Something that I do, that I educate quite a bit on, is something called trauma. And trauma has the worst rap, right? Especially in our community, because most people, they hear the word trauma and they think, oh, it has to be some type of catastrophe, right? And also when you talk about different generations, you might have your parents or grandparents being like, you don't have it half as bad as I had it, so what you're going through is not traumatic, right? And
it's
that's
dismissive.
Right. And we do that. We do that in our community. And so I educate people on trauma and I redefine it for them. I reframe the actual definition for trauma. Trauma is anything that causes a person, young or old, across the lifespan, to change the way they view themselves and the world and the relationship in between. So anything that forces us to kind of reinvent ourselves or to consider what our identity is, right? Anything that has us feeling like, gosh, that's not how I view myself. That's not how I want to be, right? Anything that causes us to question, ourselves and our identity, that is the definition of a traumatic event. So with that definition, that changes the game because what's traumatic for one person may not be for another.
It's relative.
May not be for another. And what's traumatic for one person may be traumatic for another, but they may show different signs and symptoms. They may have a different response to that trauma.
So that's why you didn't go right into those signs and symptoms, because you're like, I got to lay this out.
I got to lay the foundation.
I loved it.
Yes, we have to understand what we're talking about because, again, when I talk about my testimony and people just talking at me and just telling me what these terms are, the risk is that, we adopt those. Right. I adopted the fact that, you thought that was a suicide attempt, so now I've got to walk around with that label, that stigma attached to it and not even process that maybe I just wanted the pain to end and maybe I don't have the skill set or the tools or the resources, the support, which you talked about earlier, to unpack that. So it's so important that we understand the difference.
So with the understanding of that difference and a person who may be presenting signs of, I just want this pain to end, even if I don't know this is going to end in permanence, or I am consciously choosing to make this permanent decision. I think about when you saying, I saw my roommate showing signs. I didn't really know how to deal with it. So I'm sure now you can think back on some of those things that you witnessed way before being a professional that might still line up with some of those signs and symptoms that are common. Can you share some of those?
Absolutely, because you don't have to be a professional in order to recognize signs and symptoms. You do not. And in most cases, it's not the professional that's recognizing it first, right? It's the friends, it's the family members, because you guys really are the front lines, So some of those signs and symptoms is, number one is like withdrawal, isolation. That's why I hate the term social isolation, because social isolation is a key component of mental dis-ease causing disease, right? And so anybody who stops doing things that they normally love to do, is isolating from friends, family, any type of connectivity in the community, that's a sign and symptom. I know Hope spoke about the anxiety about connecting, right, in the congregation or with the church community. So those are signs and symptoms. Anytime that we have a problem connecting, there's usually something going on. Giving away belongings, making statements like, making statements that would imply that they're not going to be there in order to share that experience with you, Let's see. The thing that with signs and symptoms is that even happiness and high achievement can be a sign and symptom, right? Because we don't want to rule out any group or population from being at risk of suicide. And I say this because we actually see, especially in our young people, high achieving youth. Wow. Youth that are athletes, that are straight A students, that are highly involved in church, or have that spiritual support. We see those youth that are attempting and dying by suicide. And so you don't want to stigmatize, suicidality and say, oh, it has to be somebody that's depressed, that's crazy, that's mentally ill, there's something wrong with the parents, the family. No, we actually see a lot more on the opposite ends of that.
And one of the things I always share is that the best thing people can do is to be present. Pay attention, trust your instincts, right? When you have a loved one, you know what their change in behavior looks like. Yes. You know when they don't seem like themselves, which could be indicative of a trauma and they're seeing themselves different and the behavior is showing differently. So I always just say, just be present, pay attention, listen. And when that happens, and if someone notices some signs for a particular individual, what can they do next?
The biggest thing is asking the question and asking the question direct, right? So language is so important when it comes to suicide. I always tell people the first thing that I can't stand is when people say commit suicide. You know, you want to commit suicide, or you want... People don't commit diseases, right? Suicide is the end stage of a psychological or emotional dis-ease.
Say that
right?
again.
Yeah.
People do not commit diseases. Suicide, it's the end stage of an emotional or psychological dis-ease, right? And so we have to change the language, and we have to ask directly, not, do you feel like hurting yourself? Well, somebody that's suicidal is already feeling hurt. And they're already feeling hurt because of internal and external reasons, right? So ask directly, are you thinking about suicide? And the next step is probably the most important step, because then you have to listen and be okay listening. And I know a lot of our parents and things, we want to jump in, we want to fix, we want to say, no, that's not right.
Not my kid. Right.
Yeah,
Not my kid.
exactly,
Like, not my kid, not my baby. Yeah.
Exactly. And so we have to stay silent, stay open, and listen to what that person is saying.
Right.
And as parents, as adults, we can practice this in everyday, interactions, right? Because how many of us will say, "Hey, how you doing?" to our coworker, to somebody that we know, and we don't really want to know how they're doing, right? We want them to say, "Hey, I'm doing great," so you can keep it moving, keep it moving. So you practice that type of relationship, right, in everyday interactions, and you're open to what people are telling you. Be open to hearing your child in that example tell you their reasons for wanting to die, right? And then you're guiding, you're more of a mentor in this space, and you're guiding them to then talk about, okay, I've heard all these reasons why you want to die, and you validate that.
Right.
And then you guide them to start talking about, what reasons do you have to live, right? And then once you get just one, all you need is one, right? You anchor that one reason to live, and you start connecting with resources. It's not enough to have informal supports, meaning family, friends, church groups, social groups. We've got to have some formal supports. And we heard Hope talk about, no, I need professional help, So we've got to drop the stigma when it comes to having a professional involved in this life or death situation.
Wow.
Let me tell you, I'm so cool.
Dinisha, look.
Okay.
And I know we coming to an end, and this is we might have to have you back, Bianca. We have to have you back, because there's a lot that we have to continue to speak about.
Anytime.
Because it's such an important topic.
I agree.
So I'm gonna ask that Dinisha, Bianca, we close it out, because I know that this is rich.
Absolutely. Can we really quick, Commissioner? You shared about the Safe Talk. I've done this training with the Nevada Coalition of Suicide Prevention. It allows you to practice a lot of those things that you talked about. One more resource that you can share. You've shared a little bit about your 11 triumphs, but reach in now so that people know how to reach out to you.
Yes, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share that. I do have a web application. It's going to be a mobile application starting November 1st of this year. It's called Reach In, and the web URL is reachinnow.com. But it is a resource, and we talked a little bit about this before, but I'm all about empowering community and empowering people with lived experiences to step forward as the experts in this space. It's not about the letters after the name, it's the name, the letters in the name. So reachinnow.com, and then the mobile application will be coming soon to Google Play and to your App Store November 1st.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Again, people, reachinnow.com is going to be live November 1st.
Yes.
And we just want to say, if you heard something today and it made you question feelings that you may have, we are asking you to seek help. We are asking you to reach out to someone. And someone's going to be there for you, and you have a lot to live for. This is Commissioner McCurdy on Mental Health Mondays with the People's co-host, Dinisha Mingo. Dinisha, close us out, and I'm just so grateful for you being here, and I'm so grateful for both our guests today. because there was a lot shared. And I just have to say thank you for your courage at 17.
Absolutely.
To decide to make the choice that, you know, I've identified my purpose, and I'm going to spend my time now helping others work through what they're going through. So thank you.
When I hear Bianca and even Hope speak, I hear so much passion. And I think when we find things we're passionate about, which typically is about serving others, and that's the spiritual element, that you are able to find purpose. And I'm thankful because I found my passion and my purpose with what I do at Mental Health. So I'm just grateful for both of them, for their stories and what we're doing. And just for anyone out there, I know that this episode is a little bit longer than normal, but you understand why. There's still not enough time. And anyone out there, if you have a loved one who may seem like they're changing, reach out for help. It is okay. You do need professional help. It is okay to get professional help. You're not alone, and you don't have to go through it alone. It takes a village, and I preach this every episode. Support, support, support. And so we are here to support you. MHS is. You can find us at mhsbehavioralservices.com or call us at 702-848-1696. You are worth living for. So we're going to help you, support you in knowing that, finding that reason, and continuing to choose life every day.
Thank you all for joining us for our third episode of Mental Health Mondays with McCurdy and Mingo. We'll see you next time. Stay healthy, stay strong, and we'll see you soon.
Give me a hug.